everyone. Welcome back to a Note to Birth podcast. Here we have the amazing Mike Rosen and the beautiful Meghaan O'Brien, these parents that are choosing this sovereign path, this beautiful path. They chose home birth. And I had the honor, the absolute honor of being there in that space when your daughter came forward. And I wanted to share a little bit about that experience and hear from you. What was your motivation in choosing home birth? And yeah, we'll just dive in with that question from the get-go.
I guess when I found out I was pregnant, I mean, we were trying to have a baby. We knew we wanted to. We waited a little while. I waited quite a while. I think I was turning, I was like, I'm going to be 40 next year. We better do this. Like, kept waiting for the perfect time or like things to be in alignment with other things in life, like where we wanted to live and all these things. And once I found out I was pregnant. I felt like I was immediately on this timeline that wasn't mine. It was, this like almost taking over of your body by the birth and by the pregnancy of this being born and their unfolding within you. Um, and all these decisions that needed to start happening. And I was like, wow, like not that prepared for how serious it felt to take on the responsibility of making these choices in terms of how to handle myself in the pregnancy within the medical system and how to care for her, but find this balance between what I dreamed of and what was available, I guess. So I come from three or four lineages, I guess, but like part of it is on the Northwest Coast here. And really, I know a lot of researchers, and I was really curious about how our people handled birth. So there was an element of digging into that and really wanting to know like some of the practices around it, which I didn't find a whole lot. And then I got quite quickly pointed in the direction of your Instagram page through a friend of mine that I'd done some plant medicine work with up in Pemberton, who introduced me to Gloria LeMay's work and said that you'd known her as well and worked with her. Or learned from her in some way. But yeah, I guess I feel really grateful that, um, grateful that what was happening in the few years prior to me getting pregnant, I kind of had some exposure to that through the Free Birth Society and Yolanda Norris Clark's speaking and writing, which is all very powerful, and the number of births that are being recorded from home that you can watch. I was just like blown away with this. So I was aware, I guess, of like, at the furthest that I would want to go into the medical system was midwifery within the system. So right away, I got myself in there because I know how busy it can get. And then I was like considering full like free birth. And so it was this like kind of dance between the two. And I ended up taking Gloria's course as well when I think I was like maybe 7 months pregnant. I think I started doing it. But yeah, that was part of the decision to be at home, I guess, just kind of unfolded from
Really
there.
like tuning into your indigenous roots and wanting to birth in a way that is encompasses this element of welcoming your ancestors into the space and having this more peaceful environment, having this more physiological approach to birth, because that's a lot of what Gloria is teaching us through the Wise Women Way of Birth training, is that birth is inherently safe. And when we actually don't disturb the process and we don't interfere, there is this natural cascade of hormones, and it's a beautiful process overall, right? And right before we went on air, you were talking a bit about how the process of childbirth holds this extreme amount of power, right? And the energy that we see when we're in the portal, that what I see as a doula and a birth attendant in the birthing space, is that when a family is engaging in physiological birth, they're surrendering to some sort of higher energy, God, whatever you want to call it, source energy, spirit. They're tapping into something that's more otherworldly, right? Um, And then just surrendering into the anatomy and physiology of birth, which inherently is perfect and designed so perfect, especially when we don't interfere with it, right? So I wonder if you can speak to that a little bit around what you were noticing in your birthing portal as you're bringing forward your daughter, this energy of source. Um, yeah.
Yeah. Uh, I guess, yeah, my dream birth that I wanted was my mom and my grandma there. Um, and my grandma got COVID right before. But I had like this support of a couple different people, but one was my mom and Mike. And I feel like once birth had, like, the contractions had started, it felt like it was a 22-hour total, but it felt like it was just like it roared like the whole time. I don't feel like I had any rest period, and I got really exhausted. There was also a lot of purging, but I feel like purging in the sense of like with in like peyote ceremony, they don't call it puking or getting sick. It's getting well. And I was quite attuned to thinking of purging as like a purification, just like your body's making way and trying to purify itself, it, along with like physical, like toxins and things, but also just like energetic, the space that's in that. Um, so that was quite intense, but there was definitely, I feel like the last maybe 2 hours um, or so, especially with the breathing, like that, there was moments within that with um, you and the other birth keeper who is with us, and my mom, just all of us there, and Mike in the birthing tub with me at the end, where it felt like very, I don't know, just the presence of like this, like ancient feminine energy, and um, yeah, being able to surrender and kind of almost merge with it, because the whole thing with me with it the whole time it was happening was like it's happening to me, or like I can't do this, and like being like, you're doing it, it's happening, it's your body that's doing this, you can. And I guess like I think it was a lot of the things that I'd heard you say over the course of going to like the birth circles and like the pregnancy kind of women's circles that we were going to, just like um I don't know, just like encountering and becoming like merging with my own breath and body, I guess, and allowing this like force to move through and her to move through, and like the tremendous amount of trust that I had to keep coming back to, that for as like kind of scared I was of things going wrong or ending up in the hospital or something horrible happening, that like what would it be like to be a being coming from, the spirit world, to decide to come if I was the baby in the belly and I had to do this journey, just like tapping into what it might be like for her. Found a lot of strength in that. But I've definitely, with my mom, I mean, meant so much to me for her to be there, and to have her support and presence. And I feel like there's been a lot of healing that came through that for us in our relationship, but her also as an individual. Yeah, just absorb.
Baby girl,
Hi.
what are you doing here?
I'm talking about being born, baby. Hi, Kenny.
I love how
Hey, girl.
when you start to presence, hello, darling, welcome. Hi, Kimmy. I love when you start to presence the idea of really connecting and tuning in with her energy throughout the birthing experience. Oh, thank you. We're going to share? Bunny, 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 bunny. Bunny's on air with us. um, yeah, so being in communication and having this strong dyad with your daughter, with Kenny, through the birthing experience is actually there's so much medicine within that. And I have seen a lot of women do that in their space where they are wanting to communicate with their child just so that they can surrender into the will of that child. I am choosing to be here and birth my baby, and you now choose to be present with us, earth side. So what do we have to do to work together? And I love how you said you're merging your energy with her in those moments, and also merging the energy of, like, you're merging yourself with this divinity within you, and this full trust in the process, which not a lot of people tap into that. They are looking for someone else to birth their baby for them. They're looking for someone to deliver their baby. And I feel like we're shifting out of that consciousness now. We're coming into a place where we are allowing the children to lead the way, and we're allowing for them to hold their presence and let their presence be known even when they're intra-utero, right? So maybe we can speak to the energetics of that, Mike, like your understanding of consciousness when it comes to, Kinney being, if you can go back in time and remember when she was intra-utero, like what sort of energy was there, and then as you were in the birthing portal, what were you connecting to?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say that Meghan and I are fortunate that we choose to approach our lives with a level of consciousness, and our relationship with a level of consciousness that feels very much aligned in terms of the two of us. So when she was born, or when she was in utero, there was kind of an immediate felt sense that we both had of her spirit and how big that was. And even in terms of, again, we've been in the fortunate position to, have engaged in healing work together, Megan and I. So there were moments during the pregnancy where it was very clear that there was healing that was occurring. And we, even in utero, started referring to it as a medicine baby, and just had a ton of trust and awareness as to the gifts that she was going to bring into the world. And I think because of that, we kind of chose to honor her with all of the decisions that we were making. And we're always very conscious of that. And partially because it felt like it was in alignment with our values and our thoughts, but also partially, hey, sweetheart, because it felt like it was what she deserved. Um, and it was an opportunity for us to prove to her in the early stages that we were going to honor her existence and be there for her and support her and do all the things that she needs us to do for her to achieve the things that she came here to achieve.
And with that being a peaceful, undisturbed home birth from the beginning. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, a big part of that was also like, I mean, there were a few things that I would say were like working against us. Number one, like Megan mentioned, she was 40 when she was born, and the medical system wants to call that like a geriatric pregnancy, and they tell you there's all this, you know, risk and all this harm and all of these other reasons why it's unsafe, or why they have to take extra precautions that they wouldn't normally have to take. But immediately that didn't resonate with us because, she felt healthy. She takes care of herself from a nutritional perspective, probably better than most young people would. So there's no reason to think that her body was incapable of handling this natural thing. So there was that, but also, I mean, we had essentially like a no intervention pregnancy, like no ultrasounds, none of that stuff. So even in terms of accurate dating, it was all sort of an approximation, but based on the date that the midwives assigned to um, the pregnancy, we were technically 3 weeks post date also. So everybody in our lives were telling us that it was unsafe, that, you needed to go through the induction process in some capacity. You needed to do all these things. We were waiting too long. We were being irresponsible. And it got to the point, I think 3 days before she was born, we were kind of considering like the acupuncture approach. And then Megan I mean, you can speak to this, but you had a conversation with one of the birth keepers, the birth that we were working with, and I don't know
I
if you
think
want to share it.
well, I think in part I had booked an appointment, I think for the following day, for the Friday, I think it was, and I think it was Saturday afternoon. Was it Saturday afternoon or Sunday that I had contractions?
Saturday
Saturday,
afternoon.
yeah. Um, yeah, so for the Friday, and was like, maybe we should do like some acupuncture induction. And then I had booked it, and then I was like doing more research online about it, and I just had read an article that like a lot of people approach natural induction as less serious, um, but just like the kind of pathway to cesarean was in that one as well. So I canceled it and was like, yeah. And then the birth keeper we were working with too, she sent some literature other woman had written about waiting, like waiting for your baby.
Mm-hmm.
And the one that really got me though was induction is an insult to the baby. And you would never, when you're looking at a fruit tree, like with apples, there's some that fall early, some that fall late, and that there is artificial ways of ripening fruit, but that when you do that in the kind of like factory farming kind of setting where they ripen fruit artificially, pick it too early and then ripen it with chemicals, that sometimes the seeds aren't viable, that you're like taking something that isn't ready to go yet. And it's like this mysterious balance of like what prompts birth. I was really sitting in this space of like waiting and saw all these like natural ways of doing it with like vigorous exercise or whatever. And I was like, is this something that like women are supposed to, do I have to get to the point where I'm like, get this baby out of me and then start doing stuff? Is that what it's supposed to be? But then she came all on her own.
Well, the funny
And it
thing
was
was,
just like, it was so, yeah, so beautiful.
yeah. Well, the funny thing was, it was that Saturday we'd gone out for brunch, and we were sort of looking for things to do. And Meghan sort of jokingly mentioned, "I think we should go to the crystal store that we like, because maybe that's what she needs to start coming." We went to the crystal store and hung
Crystal
out and had
energy.
a beautiful conversation with one of the owners there, who turns out that she used to be like um, working in the birth space to a capacity. But as soon as we left, that's when the contractions started on the Saturday, which is,
Wow.
maybe a
Yeah, we
cosmic
were going
joke, maybe
across the
just coincidence, but
Broad
yeah.
Street Bridge, and I was like, oh, I think there's like something happening.
Whoa.
Yeah, and then it was lucky though. There was like a big space because they kind of stopped in the evening, and um, I had been talking to them about I think the book's called Love is in the Earth, and I have a copy of it. It's about crystal gridding, like with bodies, with your body, your person in there. And I was asking them, or I messaged her, I think on Facebook or on Instagram, and was like, "Do you know of any ones for birth that are in that book?" And so she suggested one, and we had the time to like lay out a crystal grid with like just a photograph um, there, and
We had that Saturday evening to like prepare our home,
yeah, our space
because
and
we were
home.
convinced it was happening right away. But then there was a bit of a break, and we just
Yeah.
had time to arrange things in such a way that felt like it was conducive to what Meghan wanted, and it was nice to be able to do that. But then the other thing that I forgot about is, in that visit to the crystal store, she gave us a gift, and it was from a woman, I guess, she'd worked with for a long time, who had inherited, what's going on there, girl? She'd inherited a collection from somewhere. I think someone maybe had passed away, or something along those lines. And the woman who gifted it back to her had told her, feel free to give these to people that you think are, deserve it, or who would appreciate this stuff, or whatever it may have been. So they gave us this crystal, and it was sitting on that crystal grid, but it was kind of right before Kinney came, I think, and you'd asked for it.
Oh yeah, it was like a heart-shaped one. Yeah.
And it was like upon having that also like everything started to really unfold. So just a bunch of like these really interesting coincidences. And we because we didn't have an ultrasound and we weren't really interested, we didn't know what her gender was, but there's a few people like that woman and a few other people who were just like strong maternal connected people, and without asking, without being prompted, they're like, "Oh, I'm so excited for you guys to meet your daughter," or like, "Oh, when is she due?" And they were always referring to her as that. And just there's some sort of communication, some sort of awareness that came across, and I don't know,
The
it's hard to
and
deny.
the matrilineage healing for your experience is so evident, with her being a daughter and then your mother being there and then your grandmother being around, like within the field, is just so powerful. And it's really interesting how this crystal shop experience was your form of like induction, or it's like the alternative ways for manifesting the birthing experience. And what I thought about when you were sharing about these synchronicities leading up to her birth remind me of preparing for a plant medicine journey. You just start to notice that the veil is thin. There's these slight occurrences that seem somewhat unusual, or you're just waking up to something's about to change or there's something big about to happen. And you're tuning into what you need in order to feel comfortable. And your body gave you the space, like a little bit of a break from having your initial sensations. There was a moment of pause where you could arrange your house in a certain way and get ready. And it was almost like Kinney was like saying, like, I'm about to come. Are you ready? Are you sure? And by you taking the action, like in your home to prepare your nest, is like reaffirming to her, energetically speaking, like, yes, we're ready. Come on forward, right?
Yeah, another big piece of that that's kind of related that I'm lucky enough to be part of. We both are to a degree, but there's like a men's work component of this community that we're part of that are engaging in a lot of this deep work through plant medicine, through all this other stuff. And one of the men in that group had shared with me some a suggestion or an invitation for us to sit down in ceremony with each other, however we define that ceremony, to both celebrate and mourn our relationship up until this point, because it was never going to be just the two of us ever again. So celebrate that, mourn the loss of just the two of us, that version of our relationship, and then also set intentions for what we want our relationship to look like, what we want our life to look like, how we want to support Kinney, and our fears, expressing all those things, but sitting consciously with each other to engage in that and to hold space for each other to have that conversation, to be able to share those things. And it felt so powerful that we were like, oh, we should do this after she's born too, every few months. Mm-hmm. Then after, I think the first one or two times, we're like, we should do this every month. And it's felt so important for us to stay connected, to make sure that we're in alignment with decisions that we're making, to be able to discuss the fears, frustrations, celebrate the things that are going well. And I think like that's been really, really important for us, not losing sight of ourselves and each other as partners, because that's also a super, super important thing that we want to demonstrate to her, is what does that healthy, loving relationship look like? How do we demonstrate that for her? How do we model that for her? Because ultimately that's what she's going to be looking for in a relationship when she's older.
It's a very conscious approach to the relationship, being mindful of the changes that are happening. And I love the concept of grief and mourning what once was. And I wanted to circle back to what you were saying around how the system wasn't necessarily offering you what it was that you felt like you needed in order to have your peaceful home birth experience. So, can you maybe speak to that? And what was it that you felt like your medical midwives were offering you that just wasn't in alignment with what you were wanting?
I think for me, well, I feel lucky I got into the place that I wanted to be. I would say also that it was a bit of an odd period for them as a group, I guess, because I went with Strathcona Midwives and their Indigenous led team. And when I got there, everyone but one person was leaving within a few months and going over to Pomegranate. So the Huckleberry team ended up there. The one lady stayed the same, and then there was a new team around that. I think with Indigenous led. So I think it was one Native person, and then the rest were midwives already with Strathcona, other than the one that came from no one from Strathcona, and the rest were built from the teams at Pomegranate.
So not having that like continuity then.
Yeah, that was a big thing. So I was in the middle of like their move, which was odd. And I think the thing for me that would be that the fundamental thing that I wanted was to know who would be there, and they can't offer that. There were people within the team that I resonated with, and I felt like respected me and the choices I was making. And there was like an element of feeling judged, or a feeling of, and it could be my own stuff too, but like I put myself in their shoes, and like they've gone to school for all this time, they've experienced all these other births and seen so much, and then here comes this person who's never had a baby that's like, I want to do things this way. And I can see their perspective that like, who do you like, really, like you really want to do this, like we've got all these like resources for you, all these tests and like all these things that are quote unquote for the safety of you and your baby. That's what everybody says that they want, but to me it always felt like I left feeling questioning myself and afraid of like, am I making the right choice? And just like it all, and they say it's informed, but it doesn't feel like, because I was taking Gloria's alongside it
Mm.
for the last part of it, and I just felt like every decision was like there were like statistics, and I don't know, like there's a 1% chance, this or that, and it's like, do you want to be the 1%, that you don't do this thing and then your baby dies or gets some crazy illness you could have known about, like the heel prick test thing, and just like endless. And from seeing other moms give birth and hearing about how that doesn't end once the baby's born, like it keeps going, and being aware of how much you need to continue to protect your space after birth as well.
Yeah, they're
For like,
constant. They're constant when it comes to having you make these decisions that they say a lot of the evidence is based in on science. It's science based, right? And we're having to perform these tests and these offer you these diagnostic tests so that you can ensure you're healthy and your baby is healthy. um, and I hate that they just play this dead baby card so easily, right? If you don't do these things or perform in this way or adhere to our agenda, then you are putting yourself in danger, and how irresponsible of you, right?
Mhm.
And so, in my perspective, that sounds like coercion, medical coercion. If you don't do these things, you're irresponsible. We're judging you. That just doesn't seem very fair.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, like fairly early on in the pregnancy is when Megan started to express to me, at least, that she was interested in the idea of home birth. And at the time, I didn't think you were allowed to do that. And I remember, I think we were like coming back from the ferry from somewhere, and you had pulled up a video on YouTube of a woman giving birth at home, standing up, and the baby came feet first, like all these things that it kind of shattered all my expectations as to what the birthing process was supposed to be and all these rules that I thought needed to be in place. And it looked peaceful and it looked more natural and it looked like it made sense. And for me, it was like a reminder of a few things. Number one, like I've always trusted Megan's intuition, especially with these things, so strongly. And if she has a strong gut feeling one way or the other, it's usually correct. So it was an opportunity to honor that, and feels like, in a way, was like my first test as a father, was to prove to her how I was going to show up and support her, and to prove to Kinney how I was going to show up and support her. Um, but also it was very clear that like this is her experience and it's my role, it's their experience, and it's my role to make sure that I'm supporting and protecting that so they can get the fullness and as much out of that as they want. So empowerment is a huge part of that. And if we're attending appointments or whatever where it feels like she's being coerced or it feels like she's being questioned for the things that she's intuitively feeling strongly about, like I fiercely wanted to step in and did step in to try and protect and honor her agency in that, to make sure that she's getting the experience that she wants.
And you said something to me, Mike, many moons ago, and it's stuck with me ever since. And I hope you don't mind that I've been sharing this with people in my field and that are coming to Circle. You said that the masculine is this energy that's like a pillar supporting the platform that which the feminine can dance upon.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm really hearing that in what you're sharing with me. So, through the antenatal period, when working with these medical midwives, you were feeling this sense of the stability kind of wavering and not giving Megan the space to dance freely and be in her full expression. They're placing an agenda upon her or having her to make these decisions that don't feel in full in alignment with your heart.
Mm-hmm.
So, maybe can you speak to that analogy that you were sharing?
Yeah, and I think just to piggyback on that for a second, we talked a little bit before about like the profundity of the spiritual nature of the experience, like Megan was sharing, um, you know, tapping into that like ancestral, maternal, feminine energy. I think we were having a conversation leading up to the birth, and I had this very vivid image in my head that came, that I realized like the crowning process, like it felt to me like it was just like this energy shooting in both directions, and it felt like the most profound like tether between like earthly material world and, spirit world, the divine, however you want to define that. And in that moment, I was like, wow, there's such profound beauty in that. And it feels like it would be such an honor and such a gift to be able to witness that. And therefore, it's important for me to honor and offer as a gift everything I possibly can to facilitate the ability for that experience to unfold for her, right? So that means protecting that space. It means being diligent about making sure that I'm honoring her requests and the things that she wants to do, and to be able to support that in the best way possible, and to not try and intervene, because it's not for me. And the more I try and intervene, all I'm doing is depriving her of the opportunity to have the fullness of that experience. And all I wanted was for her to have that, but to be reassuring, to know, I know that you're going to be safe. I know that you can handle this. I know this is what you need, and you're entitled to this. And on the other side, it's going to be profound. And that's just paid off in droves. I mean, I witnessed, like Meghan talked about, the getting well, and I saw the healing that I knew that she was carrying with her unfolding. I saw her relationship with her mom healing in that moment. And there was a moment I remember specifically where I was sitting on the couch and Meghan was in the birthing tub, and the birth keeper was there, as was her mom, supporting her. And I remember sitting back and witnessing and really tapping into this idea of like this, there's such a strong, powerful, like divine feminine energy in that space. And it would be inappropriate for me to try and intervene. And all I'm supposed to do is sit back and witness it and be in awe of that power and that majesty. And it was, again, this was ultimately Meghan and Kinney's experience, but it felt like a real honor to be able to witness it and celebrate that and see both of them achieve the fullness of their power in that moment. But a lot of this, to answer your question before about this idea of the role of the masculine and the role of the feminine, came about when I think Meghan was probably about 2 or 3 months pregnant. And immediately I had this realization that, like, holy shit, what does it mean to be a father truly? What does it mean to be to hold this masculine role within the family? What does it mean to be a husband? What does it mean to be a father? What does it mean to set this expectation? Because if it's a son that we have, then he's going to want to model that behavior. And if it's a daughter that we have, then that's what she's going to be looking for in a partner. So it felt like incredibly important work for the remainder of that pregnancy to try and dive as deeply as I possibly could into asking those questions and solving those things. And it was and continues to be an incredibly fruitful journey, and also meant that because both of us were engaged in similar kinds of work through that process, just meant that we were as tuned in and conscious to those synchronicities as we could have possibly been, and opportunities to practice in the months, days leading up to the birthing experience, to make sure that we were showing up correctly for ourselves and for each other in that moment. And it felt profound. It felt like the most connected I've ever been. And there have been moments since where I feel like we've been tapping into it and more frequently. But it's to me, that analogy that you brought up, it feels like there's a very distinct and important role that the masculine plays in the family dynamic in general, but especially in the birthing space. And for me, it's something that I've become incredibly passionate about, because it doesn't seem like there's a lot of conversation about that. And it's necessary in order for the whole experience to unfold in the way that it is meant to.
That's right. There is this divine orchestration that we have to surrender to when we are witnessing birth. And you were able to tap into the energy of sitting back, sitting on your hands, and being in reverence for what is unfolding and what is occurring for Kenny's birthing process and for Meghan's transition from maiden into mother. And that is one of the hardest things to do in the birth space, is to sit down and sit on your hands and just bow down to what needs to happen. And there's a lot of this masculine energy within the system, and within the medical system, and even with medical midwives, the approach is masculine, but it is to interject, to be masculine and to fix something, right? We want to get this baby out of this woman's body. And so how can we do it? What tools can we use? What interventions, what medications can we offer? and they are in under the understanding that these interventions truly do help. What do you think about that? Do you feel as though these interventions are supporting and are conducive to the physiological process, or are they interfering? Yeah.
I mean, I'll quickly answer, and then I want to hear Megan's thoughts on it as well. But like the things that you described, I think are inherently masculine traits, right? Is to apply logic and reasoning to problem solve, to diagnose the situation, and to be able to, like, as quickly and efficiently as possible, move forward with solutions, right? So it's very much like, and there's a time and place for that, but it's a lot of head thinking,
That's
right?
right.
And I think the gift and the beauty of what like this feminine energy brings is way more like heart feelings and energy, and tapping into your intuition and listening to your body and understanding energetically what is and what isn't happening. And I think, like we've talked about this before, is like a lot of this testing, a lot of these diagnoses, even though they may be good intentioned, they may be nefarious, who knows, tend to just create more problems, because ultimately you're approaching this by looking for things that are wrong, as opposed to saying, well, everything appears to be good. Intuitively, it seems like everything is progressing the way that it should, so let's just sit back, versus let's look for problems. Because, I mean, you look hard enough, you'll find problems in anything, right? And then it just exacerbates the issue. And, you know, cascading interventions and all these things where ultimately you're not making decisions anymore, you're being whisked away, and you've given away all of your power from the experience.
Yeah. Breaks my heart.
Well said.
Yeah, very well said. Yeah. And it breaks my heart. And that's why I feel so passionate about this work and trying to bring this into the light so that people can see that it is possible to have an undisturbed birth, and it is possible to find the trust in physiological birth. You are prime examples of this. You were able to be in that space of trust and surrender and have reverence for the feminine in her intuition. And it can be a scary place within the mystery of birth. It is the void. Anything could occur. There's so many possibilities. But I do believe that the less we interfere, or when we do interfere, may it be more peaceful, may it be more gentle, may it be like eye connection, eye contact, connection, getting into the heart space of the woman instead of just looking at her bodily functions and seeing as though something's wrong. Oh, your pelvis is too small, there's no way this baby's going to come out of your body. Oh my gosh, I've heard that one so many times. It's just like, really? Are we really, with all this evolution, all of a sudden we've come to a place where babies no longer fit through her body? Like, this is just ridiculous.
Yeah, and ultimately I think high level, for me at least, I would imagine for Megan too, for me it was the most profound um, practice in faith. And that's true in a number of different ways throughout the process. Like, you know, even family members being like, well, you got to have these tests to figure out if the baby's got Down syndrome, or figure out to make sure they've got all their limbs. You got to make sure all these things. And Megan and I spoke about it, and, you know, we both came to the conclusion that, like, those things wouldn't affect the way that we love this baby or the way that we show up at all. You know, it's not going to make me love this baby less if they've got extra or less fingers, or if they've got whatever things. You know, this is something that we've brought into the world that's chosen to come to us. There's a reason for that, and we're going to honor that experience. So what's the point in knowing all it's going to do is make us stress out more about potential complications or whatever? We'll roll with it as it shows up. And the moment right before she was born, I was in the birthing tub with Megan, and she was holding on to me, and, you know, it was sort of like the next push, this is when the baby's going to come. And it was like, you know, one of these moments where I was sitting there and felt like, I wouldn't say fear, but there was a moment of like, this is about to happen, and we've, call it stubbornness, call it faith, call it commitment, whatever it is, you know, we did it. We made it to this point the way that we wanted to. And whatever's going to happen, whatever gender this baby is, if the baby shows up alive, or God forbid, not alive, or whatever form it is, like, this was exactly what was supposed to happen. And we honored the experience to its fullness. And I'm okay with whatever is about to happen. And then of course she comes out and she's beautiful and her arms and
Oh
legs
yeah,
are fully extended and her eyes are open and she's perfect,
yeah. No, I had watched so many birthing videos, and like, sometimes they can come out blue, or the cord around the neck, and like all these different things. And I have a friend who, yeah, had like the shoulder dystocia when they get stuck in the shoulder coming through, and like just you hear all these different things that can happen. And but yeah, she came out and she was just like, she had, because she was 3 weeks over, she had no vernix. She's just a little nice little head of hair and like perfect French manicure. Her nails were so long, and she let out a little wah, wah. It was so cute, and she was just there.
Yeah, it felt like she
And you
announced
were right
herself.
there, and you
Yeah.
were, there was like nothing was wrong. It was perfect. And for me, anything also of like being like pregnant and being like, okay, when she's 10, I'm going to be 50. Like when she's this age, I'm going to be this age. Just like that kind of mental. I'm like, can you do it? And just when she was born, it was just like, everything's going to be awesome. Like, it's going to be perfect. It's so perfect. Like she's such a gift.
Yeah, in an interesting way, we
And
both shared this before, but like in a way, she's today's her 18-month birthday, but it feels like she's been in our lives forever. I don't
oh
know how
yeah.
to explain it, but it feels like she's always been there in one way or another.
Feels like a full circle moment, and so much beauty within it too. And I just can't imagine people choosing an alternative to that, an alternative where um, they're subjecting themselves to trauma and what could potentially be really harmful for their mental and emotional body and their spiritual body, right? From what I'm gathering and remembering myself and what I was feeling in the space of Kinney's birth was just pure divinity and pure extraordinary and miraculous and perfect and peaceful. And these are the energies that are just conducive to healing for humanity. Um, and so when we think about that and think about when children are being born into trauma and rushed into the process of birth through the induction, or born in a way that feels really traumatic, no wonder we're dealing with what we're dealing with in humanity. So that's kind of the intention with these conversations, and I'm really hoping that more families can tune into the energy of home birth and choosing that and having faith in that what is meant to unfold for their family will unfold, if you're held in a good way. You did have myself, you had another birth keeper in the space, after choosing that the midwives weren't necessarily the people for you in that space.
I did go to all my appointments and everything. Like I wanted the security, I guess, so to speak, of not being arrogant enough to think that like I'm, when I see so many things going wrong around you, like to think that like, oh, my birth is definitely going to be perfect, you know. So I did stick with them, but I didn't feel any. There was no, didn't cross my mind ever, like throughout the birthing process, to call them for any reason. And
And
I would, I think, yeah, I, yeah, just what people say about it being such a, so attuned of a space, I guess, when you're in the birthing portal, as you call it. Because it had been me and Mike since, I guess, 1 in the morning until about 10
yeah,
in
she
the
morning
morning, and it
contractions at
was
around
like
11 at night.
we kind of had like our own little rhythm going. And then when the birth keeper showed up, it was kind of like, oh, is this like a good thing? Could we have handled this on our own? And it was just like, but just like so graceful and so perfect. And like, I mean, I think I waited 4 or 5 days after she was born, because the midwives were very stressed because I missed an appointment, and then I wasn't returning phone calls that they had made, because she was, and they were like, we really got to get you in here and we got to induce you because you got to get that baby out. I was like, so sorry, she's born. And I'd heard so many stories about like midwives being very put off by people who kind of use the system to go through and then don't call when the baby's coming. Um, which like, anyway, they were pretty understanding and good about it. But yeah, it's just such a, there was just, it just continued though. Like they were as good as they were, there was this like, the body exam I let them do was like, oh, she's got a sacral dimple. Like she's gonna, it's like, this
What
like
is that?
this emergency thing where like, oh, but we don't know, we can't see the bottom because sometimes it goes in, like it's a detached spinal cord is not tethered
Oh,
to the
wow.
base of the spine, and it will go right, the dimple sometimes will go be open into the nervous system and can show up when they're like 2 or 3 trying to learn to walk or something, and gets progressively worse. But it was just this big thing that like you need to have some tests to make sure that she doesn't have this thing, and it was just like I was in tears for quite a while, and it was just like not nonsense, but just, I mean, it's other people's fears because they have their overseeing body as well over them. Like, and I think one of them had misdiagnosed or waited too long to tell them about something, and it was a real issue. So they were like hyper vigilant about it. And
Right. So this like anomaly situation really set the precedent for the rest.
Well, it's their
Yeah.
fear,
Yeah.
like imposing on our experience to a degree is what it boiled down to. She was scared because she'd made this mistake before, she was going to make it again. So like that.
better just be safe and go get this test and make sure.
But ultimately, it's fueled by fear. It's fueled by this lack of faith or trust. And again, sometimes reasonable, sometimes not.
Yeah, not to say that things don't happen, or.
But I think what
But
it boils down to is also like foreign outside energies in whatever capacity are going to impact your ability to show up in those moments. So it's important to be incredibly careful as to who you let into those sacred spaces. And like Meghan mentioned, you know, the first 12 hours or so of when she started to go into contractions was just the 2 of us at home. Because she started contractions, we spoke to the first keeper, and she said, okay, you know, it's potential, like, you know, this is tied to circadian rhythm, all these things, like it might slow down in the morning. So just keep track of, you know, how long each contraction is and the time between them. So I was just taking notes in my phone, and it just kind of never stopped. So, you know, in the morning, Meghan wanted to go into the bath. We were sitting there, and it was sort of like, okay, maybe we should reach out to her and let her know what's going on. And then we did. But I remember having this moment where she was laying on the couch and I was sitting there with her, and it was like, this is perfect. Like, this is how it's supposed to be. It feels so comfortable. It feels so right. And then I started to get worried, like when she shows up, it's going to change the energy away, like in a big way. And maybe that's not going to feel as good. And now I've felt like what seemed like the optimal arrangement, and I didn't want anything to get in the way of that. And then obviously she showed up and it was perfect, and she was so gentle and so delicate. And then hours later, when we called Meghan's mom to come over, I had that same fear. It was like, I don't know if she's going to be able to tap into this and all that stuff. And she showed up and it was perfect. And then, you know, in the last few hours when you arrived, Meghan and I mentioned this, we said it to you before, like it felt like an angel walking into the space. Like every step of the way, it just felt like it was the right person at the right time and exactly what was needed. And everybody was tuned into the experience that we wanted to have and the potentiality of that experience, and what felt like, you know, the honor of being able to witness and hold space for that and participate and contribute to that. And we're very lucky in that capacity for sure.
Wow. So you both really did your due diligence. If anything, for families that are trying to manifest a similar experience, this peaceful home birth experience, what sounds to be imperative is knowing who's going to be in the space. And that was your intuition from the get-go. You knew, like with the medical midwives, you were feeling uncertain about their presence because you didn't know who would be in the portal with you.
Yeah.
And so that was your intuition letting you know that it is really important who is in the space and what energy do they hold, what energy can they bring into the space.
Yeah. And I also knew the like kind of element of being a pushiness with it, that like I have a hard time saying no on a good day. Like, so being in the birth space, if somebody were asking me to check me like constantly, or like just kind of like the idea that you get kind of worn down by the questions or by this kind of pushiness, that I wouldn't think I had the strength to kind of say no. I wanted to ask Kinney though what she thought,
What do you think,
because
Bill?
I've talked to her a couple times about if she remembers her birth. Hey, Kinney Joe, I wanted to ask you.
But yeah, again, an interesting
you-
practice because, as Meghan said, like she has a hard time saying no.
Do you remember Madison? Hey,
Hey,
do you remember
Kinney.
Madison?
I remember
Hey.
seeing
Do you
you.
remember her?
Yes. Do you remember hearing the sounds of the drum? Oh, I should have brought my drum today. That would have been really
Yeah.
cool to see her reaction.
Hey? I
Yeah.
remember, and asked her if she remembered being born, and she said, yeah, she liked it. Hey, you liked being born, eh?
Why don't you tell us, Kenny, how was it? How was being born?
Was it cool?
Hey, I'm talking all about when you came into the world, girl.
Oh, they're so tuned in and very, very much aware of that process. They're closer to it than, like we are. Wow, yeah. Crystal. So what you're saying is that in the States, they have...
It's like a big business. The testing is offered independently sometimes, I guess. And this New York Times article was talking about how often when people go through, they do the testing, they find out something is wrong and they decide to go through, the percentages of that actually not being true. So that there's people actually aborting pregnancies based on tests that are inaccurate to a high degree. And the only way they know it is because of the births that happen, and then what they said the baby was going to have, it's not there.
Wow.
It was a pretty long article, and then especially I don't think like ultrasound isn't, I don't know that anybody's really thinking about, at least that I've come across, nobody thinks twice about ultrasounds, but like we didn't do any. I was planning to do one, and then I was really upset because my first appointment with the midwives, they offered to listen to the heart rate, and I assumed they were going to use like a non-electric one. And so she brought out what I know now as the Doppler one, and I was kind of like, oh, like kind of had like a moment of, I don't know if I want that. I don't know what that is. And then I was like, whatever, it's probably no big deal. I'll just let them do that. And then I found out after I read more about it that it actually is ultrasound technology as well. And I felt really angry at the midwife because I had been clear. I was skeptical. I didn't want too many ultrasounds. I was only willing to do one, and that they didn't tell me before doing that it was ultrasound technology. It was very, like they talk about informed consent, like where was that, So I decided to do none. I mean, she was doing so well in all the other ways that you can measure. She was just like the fundal height. It was just like she was on point every time for everything. And I don't know. I just think those things, it's just such a distrust of life and birth.
And also a distrust in what's meant to unfold for that baby and that fetus and that pregnancy. Our culture is so afraid of death. And I almost feel like we are using that fear of death to make money. And when I say we, I mean the systems at play, the medical system, big pharma, right? These companies, these industries, in trying to, like, and going back to the really what is set up for families that are pregnant, the system at play, what's available to families. There are alternative routes. Home birth is an option. They suggest having medical midwives present for the birth. But there are many families that I'm working with, just like you, that are feeling like that doesn't suit our experience, that doesn't fit our needs. We don't want to engage with these diagnostic tests and with these interventions. And I do feel like there is this shift in consciousness that's happening where more families are choosing this way to either birth completely free of medical midwives, free of the system. But what's a shame is they are cracking down on people who are choosing these alternative routes. They are not allowing for birth doulas and birth keepers to be in this space of advocating for families that want this home birth outside of the system. And it's so frustrating because that's why I wanted to have you guys on the show, to have you share your experience and be in this place of like, okay, full manifestation on the other side of home birth without medical midwives is this safe and beautiful family, right?
And I will say it took a lot of work. I'm so grateful for Meghan for the time and the effort and the learning that she was willing to do in order to understand and empower herself knowledge-wise and exposure-wise to the potential of what it could be. And then obviously her sharing those things with me as well. And then it is a lot of work to like defend, ignore, justify decisions, both with family and with other people that we spoke to who feel like you're being irresponsible, or even talking to other parents. Because I think that there's, and rightfully so, like a defensiveness that is experienced sometimes with people if they feel like you're telling them they did it wrong, or they have an intuition that they did it wrong, even though it's not about that at all. Like my perspective is like, I just want everybody to be able to have the experience that they want to have. And if that's having a birth at home outside of the system, then you should be entitled to that. And if you feel safer in with an OB and you feel safer with all those things, awesome. I want you to have that experience. I mean, there is the other side of it where, I mean, I'm biased obviously, but just like seeing her, like there's just like a purity and a beauty to all children. And it's our duty as parents to make sure that we're allowing for them to manifest in the way that they are intending to and wanting to. So there is definitely an element of like, my heart breaks obviously for like the adults, the women, the fathers, the mothers involved in these processes who are experiencing very real traumas. But there's also very real traumas that the babies are experiencing on the other side. And that means that there's like a deficiency that we're sort of creating out of the gate. And I think that it's kind of our responsibility to protect that, those precious first early moments, you know, as much as we possibly can, and prove to them that we're going to be able to show up to honor their existence and their experience in the most profound way possible. And to me, it feels like just let it unfold, you know, don't intervene, and trust, have faith in them, love them, support them. And that starts from the moment of conception, or even before that, if you're conceiving consciously.
Mm. Yeah, with women and children as the center, or those, yeah, who are capable of bringing life forward, how can we honor them, and how can we honor this future generation, and supporting them in coming into the world in a less traumatic way, in a more peaceful way. And I really commend the both of you for choosing this path and for being an inspiration for other families that are wanting to do this and wanting to birth at home, and they know within themselves that this is the what's right for them and for their baby, but they're feeling from the outside, they're feeling the pressure to go away from their heart's desires. And it's just, yeah, it's just so awesome to be in this space. And that, like I said before, it's just an honor to be able to be here witnessing you make these decisions and be in these choices where you're committed to faith in the process and committed to trusting in the feminine and in the body in the ways that it needs to birth this baby, from a place of ability instead of what you said earlier, disability or like disconnection. Yeah.
Yeah, the nuance there that I think feels important for me to articulate specifically in the context of fathers is, I mean, it's subtle, but I think it's profound, is I personally didn't choose this path. You know, Meghan did. The path revealed itself to me. And this is true of me. It's true of, I think, all fathers, is that it is your responsibility to honor those wishes and those desires as much as you possibly can. You know, there's this path revealed itself, and it's not my place to try and direct it. You know, it's my place to make sure that we've got enough snacks, that we've got enough food and water, that we've got enough layers to be able to continue down that path as far as we need to. But ultimately, like, this is her experience, this is her guide, this is the most profound, and one of the most profound and most powerfully connected opportunities that are going to avail themselves to her. And it feels like robbing her of that experience in any way would have been a real shame. And yeah, I think that's the message that I have for expectant fathers in general, is like, listen, trust, and support that. That's what you're here to do.
Amazing.
And I would say also, like, I have a lot of respect for women who, I don't know if you, who birth their babies just by themselves, all on their own. And I'm like, so much respect, because I felt like with the 4 people that attended her birth, like I felt like I needed that much support. and everybody brought a different thing in a different way. Especially the birth attendant, she, for some reason, was the only one I could listen to. Was about breathing or like focusing on a certain thing. Like my mom could try to tell me something, or Mike could, and I would just like, it didn't land. And for some reason, it was like the birth attendant. And the one thing I would say too is that nobody once touched me like the whole time. Like it was like support in this other way, I guess, and just maybe having somebody there with the knowledge of having seen other births to know if something was like going wrong, to be know what the red flags were. Because yeah, when I had the medical midwives check me after, and they did what I let them do one check, because my birth attendant, she only looked for tearing, she never touched me, and whatever the other midwife who did it was just like, I felt so violated by, like, I had no, it was so unexpected, and like I would not imagine cervical checks being something conducive to being comfortable in a birth space. Like, I'm glad that I had the experience I had, and the respect for my body and my space, and the respect for the process. And I think, like, I just, aside from that tangent, just like, I feel so lucky to have had yourself, you there, and the birth attendant who was there, and Mike there, and my mom there, and but what you're doing, like the amount of education that I had through seeing other moms that have worked with you, and like everything, it's not to be like, it's not like, I don't take it lightly, you know, what you've offered and what you're offering. I think it's a real gift to like humanity, the future generations, and to the current generations that are birthing and choosing these ways. Like, it's this like beautiful reminder and like guidepost to like turn back, you know, to a certain way of looking at things, of having somebody that has faith in your body other than yourself too, and trust. Like, I try to put myself in the perspective of if I was a birth keeper, if I was a doula, and like if I was a doula specifically, because I did that training, like um having, do I have the confidence in other women's bodies, or in the like guiding them in directions that, like, if something were to go wrong like that, you know, just that confidence, I guess. I don't know. I just, sorry, I'm just rambling. I don't know what I'm trying to say.
It's so beautiful.
I was trying to say thank you.
Aw.
Thank you so much, from like a really, just from a really like amazing space of gratitude for what you do and what you did for us. And like, as I see others like experience working with you, it means so much. I hope you get to do the work that you're doing for a very long time.
I hope so too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hope so too. Because the more births that I attend, and peaceful births, which is the majority, right? The more that confidence is instilled within me, which then is an energy that other mothers and families can attune to. So in me holding the confidence of physiological birth and trusting and having the faith, it offers this energy to other families, right? And I've only ever seen physiological birth be something of the divine. And I want that for all families, and for us to honor the children in the ways that they want to be born. And how do we know that? Well, we get quiet, and we become more conscious, and we meditate, and we breathe into our bodies, and we get rid of the distraction and try and clear ourselves from distortion, and just be in the space of love and trust that the birthing process is a rite of passage for the family. And this initiation for you as a father, for you as a mother, it's just so powerful. And I would never want to take that power away from a family or impose any sort of agenda on them. It just be in this space of full trust and surrender, because this is life, and we need life to continue moving forward, right? And life that is happy and peaceful, not traumatized and feeling broken. So
yeah, I think that power piece is really important, right? Because this is like a divine opportunity to manifest in your power, and you kind of owe it to yourself, I think, to have that experience at least once. If you know, this is one of many ways to be able to get there, and you really have to just choose to commit to understanding the importance of that, the opportunity that comes from that, and the implications of that. And yeah, it's continues to pay off.
Well, thank you so much. I feel. Oh, did she fall? Oh.
No, she's just
hitting her head over.
It's so wild, like seeing her grow up and staying a part of your life. And I know the two of you are considering coming to the village gathering, and so this is a space where we can be with other families, like pregnant families as well, that are wanting this more alternative way of birth, this more natural way of birth, like truly natural birth that is inherently safe. And yeah, I also feel like there'll be more of this, like this, as the podcast rolls in, we'll have more episodes, and I'd be happy to have both of you come back and have Kini come back and just share more of your story and just continue with the inspiring others. So thank you. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you for having us. Thank you for the work that you do.